So let's go ahead and get started. Good morning. I'm Terry Kimball, President and CEO here at the Chandler Chamber, and I'd like to welcome you to today's Education and Workforce Development Roundtable. Today, I am really thrilled to hear from Rich Nickel and Aaron Eckelson with the newly combined entity composed of the College Success Arizona, Expect More Arizona, and Achieve 60 AZ. Sharing about their collaboration, how they are strategically pooling resources to ensure the success of all Arizona students and a vibrant economy. And boy, we need this now more than ever. So I'd also like to thank our sponsors today who help make these programs possible: Intel, ASU, Air Products and Chemicals, Wells Fargo. And so I would just want to do a shout out to them because they continue to support education and its importance here in Chandler. So again, if you have questions for our presenters, they're more than happy to answer them. Please put them in the chat. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to first introduce Rich. Rich is the president and CEO of the newly combined entity composed of College Success AZ, Expect More Arizona, and Achieve 60 AZ, where he leads the organization in its mission to help.
Is it okay if I come sign? Do you mind? Can I come across? Sorry.
Let me go ahead, and I apologize.
Thank you.
We are going to, I could have everybody put their microphones on mute. I think we've got that. All right, so let me continue. Rich is a community leader and advocate for his increasing public awareness around the tremendous economic and social benefits about increasing attainment in Arizona. Rich brings 28 years of government, corporate, and nonprofit experience, much of that in the senior roles as financial services and educational finance across the country, including over 8 years in his current role. He is a member of numerous local and national collaborations, associations, and leadership groups. Rich was also a founding board member of Achieve 60 AZ and recently helped launch a first of its kind community effort to help increase Arizona's FAFSA completion rates using newly developed intelligence powered by technology called Ask Benji. Rich is originally a Wildcat, and he and his family came to Arizona in 2002 via the Commonwealth of Kentucky, where he earned his bachelor's degree from the University of Kentucky. So Rich, thanks for joining us. And I also want to introduce Aaron, because I know that you two are going to tag team. And Aaron is a very familiar face with this group. Aaron is the VP of Community Engagement for the newly combined College Success Arizona, Expect More Arizona, and Achieve 60 AZ, where she leads the organization's community engagement strategy to develop a cohesive vision for education in local communities across the state. Aaron has led multiple local, state, and regional collaborations to advance equity in education and build champions for achieving Arizona's education goals, measured by the Arizona Education Progress Meter. Aaron has nearly 20 years of experience in developing and running community outreach programs for nonprofit organizations here in Arizona and across the country. She graduated from Penn State University and has a passion for empowering citizens to solve pressing problems in their communities. And Erin is also, her children are products. She lives here, right here in Chandler. So welcome to both of you two superstars. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Terry. Super excited to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Bear with me. Get this up and running. You can let me know. Let's see, let's get this on slideshow mode. And there we go. Can everybody see that? We're good? Great. Okay, well, I'm going to let Rich kick us off, and then we sort of are tag teaming as Terry mentioned. So we'll go through some content. We do have a lot of information to share, and then we'll have plenty of time for discussion and questions at the end.
First of all, I just want to thank everybody for having Aaron and I today to talk about what we think is extremely important topic, and that is, how we reach our state's attainment goal by really starting early and thinking across the continuum. And as we go through our presentation today, and I'm not going to try to give away too much of the end here at the beginning, We're going to hit on some of the important pieces that I think our combined organizations will be aligning around, especially the progress meter, the education progress meter, some of the goals around that. And then also try to give you a little bit maybe of an idea about why we thought that it was time for our three organizations to pool our resources and come together. You all may have seen on February 1st of this year that we made that announcement that College Success Arizona, Expect More Arizona, and Achieve 60, really three leading education, advocacy, and services nonprofit entities. We're pooling our resources in the thought of making what we think will be a more unified, cohesive, and robust voice for Arizona, and especially for those who maybe have not had the voice that they should have had in the past. So we look forward to talking to you today about all of these things, and also hopefully about what this means to communities and the state, and how we can continue to work with cities and chambers across all of Arizona to make some of these goals a reality.
Great. Well, I will go ahead and kick us off. This is probably not new information for this group, as we have been talking about the Arizona Education Progress Meter for a little over 4 years now. But I wanted to just kind of ground us in the framework for how we are thinking about the task ahead of us as a newly combined organization, and also just as a state. In 2016, Expect More Arizona, in partnership with the Center for the Future of Arizona and over 200 partner organizations around the state, launched the Arizona Education Progress Meter. This is a first of its kind tool and blueprint for education in Arizona that maps out 8 key indicators that from the early education all the way up through post-secondary attainment on the big benchmarks in education, and helps us to measure not only where we stand, but also set forth goals on where we want to go as a state, so that we can build out the workforce of the future and have a more resilient and vibrant economy that can help all Arizonans thrive. So last year, right before everything shut down, in fact, I was talking to this group and shared a little bit of an update on where we started when we started measuring and tracking the progress meter, and where we are today. And the thing that I think I shared last year, maybe for the first time, is that at our current pace of progress, in all of the indicators, we're not on track to meet the goals of the progress meter. Now, that does not mean that we can't get there. It just means that if we keep seeing progress happen at the pace at which it has, we will not be able to achieve the goals that we had set out. This slide here sort of goes through where we started when we were tracking the progress meter, where we are today, and then what the progress has been. So you can see that in some of these indicators, we've seen some gains in student improvements and outcomes. And in some of these indicators, we've actually gone a little bit backwards. And so we're happy to talk more about any of that in the question and answer section if you have thoughts or specific questions about any of these indicators. But for the purposes of this conversation, I'm kind of going to go through this fairly quickly, because a lot of this is information that we've shared before. The thing that I think we need to always look at is that when you are looking at aggregate data, so basically all students in Arizona, from early education all the way through post-secondary, when you look at that data as an aggregate, it's easy to hide some of the real impacts and the gaps that exist in student outcomes. And so when you look at something like third grade reading and you break it out by ethnicity and race in particular, you can see that it tells a much different story. So again, when we go back to third grade, you can see that right now 46% of all Arizona students are proficient in reading by the end of third grade. When we go down to third grade and we look at it pulled out by race, you can see that that's a much different story. In fact, there's a 25 percentage point gap between our white students and our Latino students in reading proficiency, a 26% gap between our white students and our Black and African American students, and then a 39% gap between our white students and our Native American students. The other thing that's worth noting is that if you look at the trajectory of each of these lines, they're not too far off, right? So they're all sort of on the same slant for the most part. And so that I think is another important thing to be thinking about, is that, you know, students are in fact progressing at about the same pace. It's just where they're starting from is a different place. And so that's really an important piece to be thinking about as we're thinking about how to reach these goals and what it will take. And then the same story sort of rings true for 8th grade math. And, you know, actually, if we did this for all the indicators, it would probably tell a pretty similar story for all of them. And you would look at the graphs that look very familiar to this one. But there's also similar gaps in our students' proficiency levels between our white students and our Latino students, our Black and African American students, and our Native American students. And really, when we think about where the gaps are and what is a determining factor, the major differences in student performance are largely driven by income level and race and ethnicity. So the vast majority of the data and how we disaggregate it, the biggest gaps that you'll see are along those two lines. And when I talked a little bit about the trajectory of each of those lines being fairly similar, there's not a lot of deviation between each demographic of students and their progress over the years. They're all sort of moving in a similar slant, if you will, on that graph. The thing that we have to recognize is that every single student has the potential and ability to learn. And that when we're thinking about what needs to happen to help accelerate progress towards the goals of the Arizona Education Progress Meter, we have to really think about the whole student, the makeup of our students in school today, and also what it's going to take to help every student succeed. And that's really got to be the core focus of our conversations around education, is what will it take to help every student succeed? And I think when I am looking at, you know, equality versus equity, the equal supports do not produce equal results. And what that means is that students of all different types require different things and different supports. And research actually shows that when we implement strategies that support disadvantaged students, all students are better off. So all students will succeed. And some of these strategies include things like, you know, individual focused education that meets students where they're at and helps to intervene when they need it. Things like rigorous academic curriculum and a focus on college and career readiness, high expectations, and things like that, that will actually, if we implement those types of targeted strategies, that all students benefit from that. Now, I talked briefly about some of the data and unpacking it and disaggregating some of that data by race and ethnicity. We could see where we were at. That data for 3rd grade reading and 8th grade math is from 2019. And what that means is, because last year we did not do an assessment, a statewide assessment, and that's where that data comes from, we know that on top of all of these existing gaps that have existed, we are going to have the additional impact of COVID. And some of COVID's impacts have been just a lack of access to the meals and health care resources, things that a lot of students actually acquire on their school campuses. And that with schools closing down, it actually had an impact on many of our students and their families, just from access to meals and healthcare resources. In addition, there's just chronic stress on our students and our students' families. We have seen technology be a significant issue. In fact, 19% of all of our students do not have internet at home. And that's a pretty large percentage of our student population. And then if you look at quality early learning access, that number is stark. A third of all of our high quality early learning centers have closed. And some are operating with limited seats now, limited capacity. And so we already had a really fragile early childhood education infrastructure in this state. And the pandemic has significantly impacted that. And of course, if parents don't have quality childcare for their youngest family members, it's hard for them to seek gainful employment and work a full-time job, or if they wanted to go back to increase their education attainment level. So access to quality early learning is critical in that sense. And then we've also seen that students have had a lack of support from family members while learning from home as well. And so the gaps in what our students who were struggling before the pandemic and now during the pandemic, those gaps have even widened. And so it's never been a more critical time for us to think about what is it going to take to come back as a state stronger and more impactful and ready to take on the task of helping every student reach their maximum potential in Arizona. And in addition to just what we know from data, we've also done a lot to talk to people and get input on how things are going. So we conducted a teacher survey last spring near the end of the school year, and had 11,000 teachers respond to that. We have done parent focus groups in 8 communities around the state in English and in Spanish. And then we also have conducted our annual voter poll of likely Arizona voters around the state, and then a particular focus on polling some of our rural communities and voters in those communities. All of this input that we have collected has surfaced some really common themes for us. There we go. Some really critical feedback that I think is important for us to be thinking about in the context of what this means for education in Arizona, as well as what this means for this newly combined organization to work to accelerate progress towards the education progress meter goals. So some of the things that have surfaced is education is still the #1 issue. It is still at top of people's minds, and school funding and teacher pay still remains 2 of the top education issues for Arizona voters. And parents as well see this as being a top priority in addressing some key issues in education. So that is consistent with years of research and years of polling that we have done. It remains a big issue for Arizona voters and parents. Other things that have surfaced that are a little bit different, mental health. Mental health has come out as being a huge focus, and that we need to start implementing strategies that are going to address the social and emotional needs of our students. So that's critical. The other things that I think we have seen is that we know that we need more support for special education and our English language learners. Parent and family engagement and building stronger relationships between parents and teachers is critical to student success. We need to come up with good strategies for helping equip parents with the tools they need to support their students and to build stronger relationships with their student schools. The grading and assessment systems seem to be out of touch with the pandemic. And then we do know that teachers are feeling confident that they can help students get caught up, but that they are also just relying on a lot of their own personal resources, and that we need to think about how we can help the whole system sort of bounce back. And then some of the things related to the COVID impact specifically is that we saw, that there were parents and teachers that were worried about learning loss, families just concerned about financial instability, and then the responsibility of education shifting to parents, and that many parents felt ill-equipped to support their child's learning. So this is some of the feedback that we have collected, and all of this, both the data of the Arizona Education Progress Meter, looking at some of the disaggregated data and better understanding what gaps exist in student outcomes, and thinking about how do we target strategies to help all students succeed. And then we couple that with the feedback we're collecting from parents and families and teachers and voters. And this is the landscape and the environment in which we started to have the conversation around what would it take to essentially accelerate progress, and help more students receive a degree, or more Arizona adults for that matter, receive a degree or credential and be able to be successful in the workforce. And that's how we began our conversation for pooling our resources together. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Rich to talk more about this combined organization and where we see ourselves going.
Thanks, Aaron. And we'll try to do this switching of slides since Aaron is driving as seamlessly as possible, but I may have to cue her once in a while. So again, thanks for having us today. The last slide that Aaron spoke about, which really went into this, piece that talked about the impacts of COVID and kind of the perceptions going into that, and then what we actually found did happen by talking to teachers and parents, is a really good jumping off point for talking about why we made this decision to bring these three organizations together to really approach this differently. And I was thinking about the last time I actually spoke to the Chandler Chamber. I think it was 5 years ago, and it was at an annual meeting. We were in a nice auditorium in downtown Chandler. I can't remember exactly where it was, but it was about 5 years ago. And what we were speaking about that time was the creation of, right before we launched, Achieve 60 AZ, and how important it was to have an attainment goal, which now has also become part of the education progress meter goals. So we're really excited about bringing these groups together and about pooling our resources, and also about getting a name. So we won't have to be called the Combined Organization of in the next 45 days or so. We've been talking to people all over the state, and we'll talk about that a little. We didn't want to be too presumptuous in our brand and some of our strategic pieces before we really got out to the entire state and talked to some key people, and that ended up being over 300 key partners. Aaron, can you go to the next slide? So as we thought about,
Sorry, it's not advancing for some reason. Give me 1 second.
Okay. So really, as we thought about what was going on at this time, we knew there was an impetus to think differently. So, and to be bold in some respects. Don't know how many of you all have ever served on a nonprofit board. Probably some of you. Don't know if you all have ever had the opportunity to bring more than one organization together. But it's always a bold move when that happens. And there's always some impetus to make it happen. In this case, we're really thinking about a few things. One, we know that the education community, the nonprofit community, and sometimes K-12, higher education, early education, is fragmented in our state in some ways. A lot of times they have to go after the same amounts of money. And also from a community perspective, that education community, especially at the nonprofit side, is somewhat crowded. We also know that when it comes to education, the business community is even not always on the same page. We have multiple CEO groups, chamber groups, things of that nature. And I think while everybody at the top end is certainly concerned about attainment, how we get there is sometimes fragmented. We also know the realities of nonprofit funding for education in Arizona, particularly, is in with COVID. Also, we know there's a limited pool of folks who are really interested in robustly funding Arizona education, not just at the state level, but also with some of the community groups that are trying to support those that I think, we really understand have the opportunity to help us move towards our goals. You throw in COVID and kind of the uncertainty that goes with that, and also the fact that our organizations already worked together. Some of our board members served across boards, and we knew each other's strengths very well. We said, okay, let's start talking about how we can work more together. As we thought about that, Aaron, you can go on to the next one. We started doing an analysis on, what sectors really we needed to be touched and needed to be worked with to improve education. And what we realized was that between Achieve 60 AZ, which was already inside the College Success Arizona umbrella, we were their backbone agency, and I was a founding board member of that. College Success Arizona, Expect More Arizona, and really the Arizona College Access Network, which is also under the College Success Arizona umbrella. We were already involved with every sector in our community that has an ongoing interest or a key sector, I won't say every, that we had identified that has an ongoing interest in improvement in education. And really that's across the state. But we picked, I think, 8 of those here. And we said, okay, we have this flywheel that we're already involved with. If we keep moving that and making progress, we're going to align with these educational progress goals. We're going to engage these sectors, and the 3 organizations we're working with already are already deeply involved with these sectors. Aaron? So we decided to make these talks more official, really from the collaboration stage to see how can we maybe formalize some of this. Over the last 18 months, the CEOs and their seconds, including me and the executive director from Achieve 60, the CEO from Expect More Arizona, really started working together to figure out what might a model look like where we could collaborate more tightly, what might a mission and vision and a value proposition for a new organization might look like, and then also what could some initial strategic goals look like. Our boards in parallel were working monthly on what type of transition might be likely. And then around the end of 2020, all 3 of those boards came together and unanimously approved every recommendation that had made by the CEOs and the smaller board member working group. And then on February 1st, like I mentioned earlier, the assets of EMA and Achieve 60 were transferred into the College Success Arizona umbrella. And that's really an interim move while we're rebranding, which I think you'll see a new name and a launch of a strategic plan here in the next 45 to 60 days. As we started talking about, and this is, like I said, I don't know how many of you all have done this, but one of the really exciting things when you're bringing organizations together, or if you're getting to reimagine an organization, is that you can really think about the DNA of the organization in a different way. So all of our organizations, from a programming side, from a services side, from an investment side, had really been focused on helping those that we knew needed the supports the most to help the state move towards their goals. So, for College Success Arizona, for instance, we understood if we were going to help reach the attainment goal in the state, we had to think about those that were from low-income backgrounds, for instance, who were not going to college, did not have the same level of attainment. People in rural Arizona, for instance, communities of color, for instance. So really thinking about that. What I don't think we had done, because we had evolved over time, I don't think our organizations had embedded in their DNA, particularly, all of our decision-making processes, these 2 ideas that ended up being really at the top of our design principles. Now, these aren't necessarily goals of the organization. These are how we want to think about the organization as we bring it together. So the top two here that we think are tremendous assets in our state is really achieving equity at the education level, helping students with what they need to do well, all students, as Aaron mentioned, but also valuing the diversity of our entire state and what that means and how we use that as an asset to reach our goals. And I'll just give you a for instance, and this is really more of an algebra equation. So today, if we want to reach our 60% goal by 2030, we have to really understand, where the opportunity is to do that. So we know that 60% of our K-12 students today are identify themselves as non-white. We also know that almost 50% of those students are from our young Latinx population. If you just look at the Latina performance on attainment right now, what you see is that that particular group is at about 20%. Their white Caucasian counterparts are in the upper 40s. We also know that our young Latino population is growing at a line like this. So there's a lot of opportunity through that growth to gain points on that goal. So really the algebra question is, the only way it's possible for us to really meet our goal, and especially with this pipeline of K-12 to high school to college education, is by supporting those students who are the opportunity group. Unless that happens, unless we see growth in the attainment, completion, all the things that lead up to attainment, in that fast-growing Latino population, for example, we really don't have a mathematical chance of making that goal. So it's not just the right thing to do, and we know it's the right thing to do because, like Aaron said, these strategies make everything and everyone better. But we also know from an algebra perspective that we can't reach our goal unless we are giving and providing additional supports to those who need it, and also to those who we must have be successful if we want to reach that goal. All right, Aaron. So as we brought this organization together, we really thought about we certainly understood each other's strengths. And I think we are going to be able to kind of coalesce these strengths into more impact, into more scale. And that's one of the first things that we noticed about how this organization might be different. But there's a few other issues that I think, because we'll have more robustness, more capacity, we will be seen as by a lot of the community and worked with as a more unified voice, that we're also going to be much more interested, I think, in increasing funding statewide, increasing public and political will for education changes. And I think a unified voice is needed to do that, because today I do think that when we talk to our legislators, some of our policymakers, although I think we're always being intentional about having a similar message, if there's too many cooks in the kitchen, it's just not, the message sometimes gets diluted. And so I think we'll be able to bring a stronger message. And then also just really to create some courage for change. And I think as a stronger organization with a little more voice and a little more capacity now and a lot of expertise, that hopefully we're going to be able to have some of these conversations that are harder to have, but need to be had if we're going to really advance towards these educational progress meter goals. Aaron? So right now we're thinking really about four key things that, if we think about moving Arizona from the bottom to the top in many respects, and we hear these stats all the time, so I won't go over them. But there's a few key stats where we're in the bottom five. And of course we want to be in the top five. And a few things to think about as we're trying to set up this organization and how we get there, and trying to think about strategy. One is, creating this culture in our state that supports education. And I think we're seeing progress along the lines there. If you look at some of the polls that EMA has done, for instance, over the year, you will see that voters are putting education as their top, traditionally year after year after year now, are saying that's the number one issue. But it's not just getting voters to say it, it's getting voters to act on it in a way that's meaningful. And it's also getting policymakers to pay attention to that voter intent and will of the public. So really creating this statewide culture that treats teachers like the professionals they are, that respects every child and looks after every child's need, that makes resources available and access equitable. These types of ideas that we know goes with an education culture. Also closing achievement gaps at all levels. So one thing we know, and Aaron pointed it out, but it has become crystal clear. Those in our state that did not feel they were doing well or were not doing well before COVID really took the brunt of COVID. Those who were doing well or would say they were doing well, they did not feel this as much. So what happened was, while one group kind of stayed where they were, another group feels like they've gone backwards, and this chasm has been exposed of inequity, of lack of access, of lack of technology, and so in lack of achievement potentially too, because of those things. So with this gap really being now even more exposed, it already existed before, don't get me wrong, and I think that we all know that, but it's even wider now, and we have to focus on closing that gap at all levels. That means culturally, racially, income levels, rural versus urban and suburban. We have to think about this achievement gap very specifically and precisely and go after closing that gap. The third thing, and I think, Aaron, if you'll just pop that, I think it'll probably light it up. No, let's go back. Sorry. Okay. We want to reach this statewide attainment goal by 2030, and we are making some progress here. But we also know now, with these groups coming together, we're going to be able to think about this starting earlier. We know that early childhood education sets the foundation for attainment. We understand that. And with our three groups coming together, we're actually going to have expertise and capacity, I think, to be more helpful at that end, instead of just worrying mostly about what happens 1 or 1.5 steps away from attainment. So this is something that we're really going to focus on too, is how we think about the entire continuum, how we think about each of those progress meter goals across that continuum, and how we either provide leadership or we convene leadership to action around those progress meters. And lastly, of course, both the organization and the state has to secure appropriate and adequate funding to help us reach those goals. Aaron? So a few things that I think you all might recognize here, as we brought these organizations together, one thing we were able to do is bring some already really impactful programming to the forefront that already existed. And my bet is some of these brands you've seen, you probably didn't even realize that College Success Arizona, or Expect More Arizona in particular, was the umbrella behind these brands, or was in heavy partnership collaboration on these brands. So the Arizona College Access Network, for instance, serves over 240 member organizations across our state that are access providers. So if you think about organizations like Be a Leader Foundation is in that, as you think about the ASU Mother-Daughter Caucus, that's in this piece. As you think about almost any TRIO program that you've heard of is part of this AZCAN network, and they're also doing some great work. Advise AZ, College Knowing and Going, major partnership among all of these entities with Arizona Gear Up, which brings about $40 million every 5 or 6 years to our state through this federal grant. All of these programs already existed and will continue to go on, directly serving students and professionals all across the state. Aaron, of course, mentioned earlier the progress meter that you see. And then Achieve 60, of course, is really thinking about attainment in some different ways and helping people think about that through their localization of the goal efforts. And I think Chandler has also, thought about what achieving the goal looks like at a local level. That work's going to continue. You'll see a state attainment report each year. You'll still see localization of the effort all around the state. And we think we're going to be able to add capacity to that activity. Just recently, one of the things that we really thought about from the Achieve 60 standpoint is that, we know one of the key strategies of getting to our goal is getting more folks who are already in the workforce higher education attainment. It helps both them and their employer and the whole state. And we're starting to look at strategies around that, especially when it comes to adult promise programs and how businesses and governments might help and incentivize adults who maybe have some college, no degree, maybe have a job that they've been in for a long time, but want to advance, and how we work together to help educational attainment at the adult side, which also is a workforce development strategy. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see Ask Benji, which Terry mentioned earlier. This was the first of its kind in the United States, kind of technology powered by AI. It was a partnership between College Success Arizona and ASU primarily, with lots of other partners. And what we've done is created a chatbot that is really a text robot with a broad base of community support and secondary support. So if the chatbot can't answer something, we have a team of experts across the state that we work with to help students answer questions about their FAFSA. And we're now reaching over 40,000 seniors each year through this tool. And the kids love this because all they have to do is text a phone number or answer a text message. And we're working with their schools just to get their phone number, really no other, data. So we can send them this resource and say, if you need help with your FAFSA, just ask Benji. And of course, Benji being the Benjamins, right? So, FAFSA is an important piece. That's something we'll continue to work on. And if you look at, some of the financial impact that FAFSA brings, not just to that individual, but to the economy of Arizona, you would be amazed. I'll point to the middle one here, or the second one. You may not know this, but, when FAFSA money comes in, either through grants, aid, student loans, work study, or the private pieces of aid that it helps people have an opportunity for, it actually brings, just on the federal piece, to Arizona, that actually pays employees of universities and colleges $4.13 billion a year. So our schools here in Arizona are receiving over $4 billion a year that are generated from students filling out this FAFSA. So of course it helps the student go to school, but the secondary piece of that is that's $4 billion to Arizona's economy each year. That's going to pay people that work at schools. It's students spending money locally around those schools. So this is important on a lot of levels, not just for the individual impact for the student, but for the entire economy and the health of our schools also. All right, Aaron. One thing that we did when we kind of brought these organizations together, and as we really think about our strategic vision for the future, is our board actually constituted an ad hoc committee we're calling the Community Leaders Advisory Committee. And this is made up of about 35 education, business, education at all levels, business, community members, people who are more in the social side of education, the support side of education, people who are on city councils, just a wide variety of leaders from all across the state representing really the diversity of Arizona. And we've asked them to really help us think about how we might be impactful in the state, where the gaps are, things of that nature. And we really want them to help us, and we're very close to this. And this is also why we've taken our time on launching a strategy and a brand, because we really wanted to gather a lot of input. So outside of the 300 other conversations we have, we've got this group who's really helping us walk through some of these things. Influencing our strategic direction is certainly one thing we're listening to them on. But I think even more important is providing, getting guidance for them on how we can actually make a difference and an impact, not just doing more of the same in a little bigger way. Because incrementalism right now is just not going to get it done, right? I mean, we took a bold move by bringing 3 organizations together, And there was a, there was a lot to that, and we have to keep being bold. And then also, of course, we want these 35 to share as ambassadors, serve as ambassadors for us across the state, as we do you all. So that's, we want you guys to feel like you're part of this, because really this is a statewide program and organization that we're leading. All right, Aaron. And then I think lastly, as I'm talking to localities and communities, and yesterday I was on with the Mayor's Roundtable, for instance, on education that WestEd puts on. I'm thinking about what our businesses and communities can do to be part of this. And Chandler, by the way, is already doing a great job, and has been since 5 years ago when they really wanted to know more about Achieve 60. But I think just a few things I would say is, one, think about what resources the city, the chamber, important influencers can align with already local ready activities that impact access and success. So if you have an access center in your city, support that access center. It helps the entire economy. Chandler Gilbert Community College is certainly a local ready activity that needs to be supported, needs to be championed by influencers like you. Like I said earlier, focus on achieving equity and valuing diversity as an asset, right? I think sometimes we put this in a position where we think about this as in some kind of negative light, like, oh, we have to deal with this equity issue, or, this diversity is causing us some issues. We got to deal with this. This is not how we're thinking about it. And I'd encourage you all not to think about it either. It's really it's probably the biggest asset our state has, is its diversity. And how do we use that? And how do we put everything we now do through this lens of equity? And equity means a lot of things to a lot of people, so I don't want to get into that. And it might mean something different to everybody on this call. But as we're making decisions about how we spend money, who we hire, what programs we invest in, we're using these two components to really help guide our thinking. And lastly, I would just say, align with your schools, your nonprofits, other community systems you have, to localize your efforts. I mean, nobody's trusting Rich Nickel and Aaron Eccleston to come in and tell them what to do in their city. We know things that others are doing. We're happy to share that. But we know if there's not ownership of a goal and ownerships of strategies and solutions at the local level, that we're not reaching our goal. And so, I would just encourage the Chandler Chamber and really every locality and community leaders like you all that I talk to own your goal. Think about what you need for your own workforce. Think about what you need for your own goal. And then think about what those strategies and solutions are, and count on us to be helpful there. But we certainly don't make the assumption that we're going to come in and tell Chandler, how to get there or what they should be doing. But we do want to be a resource. And so I definitely will say that. All right. I think that's probably, we got some questions. Unless I bet you all have some of your own questions, but if not, we put up some things to think about.
We do have some. Wow, Rich and Aaron, I'm still taking notes. Great content information. Couple of things that really stood out to me, and we'll open it up for questions from the group, is I know somebody's got some comments on here, but you said that 19% of students do not have internet access. Are we seeing that in the rural communities, or is there some correlation? What are you seeing?
Rich, I don't know if you want to take that one or if you'd like me to.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Great. Actually, there is a large gap in technology and access to technology in rural communities. But there's also sort of technology and infrastructure deserts in our urban cores as well. So it's not an issue that is only specific to rural Arizona. However, it is probably more pervasive in rural Arizona. And so I have a really clear anecdotal story from a superintendent in Welton, which is the far east county of Yuma County. And it's sort of in the middle of nowhere. And she told me that they were giving out hotspots, but it really doesn't matter because there's not even good cell phone connectivity to connect a hotspot to. So literally, as schools are thinking about how to even support students who are learning online, they're trying to do everything possible, but the infrastructure just wasn't there to help students connect. And so in addition to not having ongoing technology access at home every day, which creates barriers for students to learning, but they also were struggling to even connect to online learning in a meaningful way during the pandemic.
Great. Couple of, Kathy's got some comments. Kathy, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much. Listen, great presentation. Thank you so much. So I have been in post-secondary education for 32 years in the vocational trade school area in computer electronics, drafting. I started an avionics program in 1990. Of course, I know nothing about a jet engine. And then allied health. And then 16 years ago, opened up my chain of beauty schools. And one of my biggest frustrations in all these years is the lack of conversation about the trades. And it's all college, college, college. Listen, my kids went to college, I get it. But the fact that you're talking about diversity in education, Arizona is second to Pennsylvania for how many career schools we have. And our graduates have huge economic impact to our community. As you were talking, Rich, about they get an education, now they're able to support their families, they're becoming tax-paying, contributing citizens in our environment, they're spending their money. And you know, we're kind of the dismissed sector of education. So I'm very happy to hear that you are going to start to include our graduates. I joined Achieve 60 a few years ago because I think it's really important. I mean, and listen, during the pandemic, everybody learned about how important their hairstylist was or their nail tech because they needed a haircut during lockdown and they realized they couldn't do it themselves. So, you know, I guess years ago, I was on the Arizona Post-Secondary Education Commission, and they had funding and some scholarships for traditional colleges and universities and community colleges. And our schools were the trade schools. And, you know, maybe it's because we are classified as for-profits. We're never included. And I have literally been dealing with the low-income students for 30 years. I know them intimately. The effort that you have to put into them to get them through school. I would love to see us be part of the conversation a little bit more. I never really see anybody from our schools on a board being able to contribute, and how we can reinstate some sort of funding for these schools. We have lots of single moms. We have a lot of high school drops that get their GEDs that come back. We offer traditional financial aid. We have VA. And, you know, I'm probably the odd man out here because I am in the trades, but you know, it's been 30 years I've been beating the drum. It's just trying to get us back, you know, at the table to include us. And I think that our schools collectively have so much to offer on how to get students through the training so that they don't drop, because we know we have a lot of drops in freshman year. So, you know, I know I'm saying a lot of broad things here, but it's like, I would love to see a direction where our vocational and trade schools are included, because we can help with that attainment. That these certificates are just as good in some cases as that 4-year degree.
Yeah,
Well,
so
Kathy,
Kathy, one thing, just so you know, I mean, the definition of attainment, we use college as a broad term because people know the word college. You start talking about post-secondary in the public eye, people's eyes glaze over and they fall down, right? I mean, so we just use a word that people know. But what we know is that the definition of attainment is someone in our state currently over 25 to 64 is how we define it right now, working age, who has a high value credential, right? We don't care where it comes from, and we don't care what they do, right? We want them to have a high value credential, whether that's an associate's degree, whether it's a license or certificate that somebody can earn a living wage off of, whether it's a bachelor's degree. So we know that to make our goal, all of those have to rise. We're certainly not trying to exclude trades, vocationals, for-profits at all. We think a lot of the strategies that localities talk about, because we're not setting strategies either, right? I mean, what we're trying to do is tell people about the information so they can make their own decisions. And at the state level, you know, I think you have good company, because, you know, the universities and community colleges would tell you they don't get any money either, not for students.
Right.
You know, the universities, for instance, they're responsible. That's why you see tuition increases. And John could talk about it all day. It's very frustrating because there's a lack of investment, de-investment. There's no investment in community colleges. They don't have a damn line anymore, right, on the budget for most of them. So, you know, you're in good company when you're frustrated about your students not having resources, because Arizona is one of the only states in the country that does not directly invest in their students from low income backgrounds to incentivize them to attend a for-profit or profit college, trade school, community college, anything. So we're super dependent upon the FAFSA, because most of our students pay for their education through federal funding, whether that's loans or grants. And that's because of the lack of willingness to invest directly in our students at the state level. And we should be ashamed of that.
I hear
Great
you.
information. So Kathy, and I want to thank you. I know that you've been a huge supporter here, and you know, the Chandler Chamber has always had that. And Aaron, I've worked with Aaron for many years. It's that P20 continuum. We were out in front of that years ago, and we put that right in our legislative document. And we also talk about what are those other resources, whether it's, you know, whether it's through Kathy's schools. I know Sherry's got a comment in here. Registered apprenticeship is a great affordable way for students to achieve their credentials as well. I think COVID has taught us all a lot that we all need more knowledge. We need to all be lifelong learners. So great comments and information. And then Council Member Ellis, I know you'd like to say a few words, so that I'd like you to, if you can take it off a mute.
Thank you so much, Derek. Thank you. Appreciate the chamber putting this together. I think all of us needed to be on this call this morning. Where are the rest of them? Whether from Chandler or even down from the governor's office, we all needed to be on this call this morning. Thank you, Aaron and Eric and John, for really giving us an opportunity right now to really look in the background of all of this. One of the things that you said that really reasoned with me is the impact that you said that you are committed to make a difference. You're committed to actions, because we can talk about it all day long. As you guys know, we have the what, we have the why, and now how. The how we're going to proceed from here. Eric, where do we go? What can I do with my little voice? I only have one vote, Eric. What can I do with that vote to make it so powerful and so impactful that it makes Kathy, anyone else on this call who would like to make a difference in someone's life through education, that I can empower them to do that. I believe in education. I wouldn't be sitting here with you if it was not for education. I know that. I know education is the only key to take people out of poverty. I grew up on that knowledge. I have lived that knowledge. I imparted into my kids and everyone that I speak with, every audience that I put me in front of it. Education is my number one goal to impart into them. So what can I do with that one little single vote that I have?
Well, Councilmember Ellis, I appreciate your passion. And every time I have the chance to be in a meeting with you, it is evident that education is a priority for you. So I really do appreciate that. I think one of the things that Rich mentioned that could be sort of a a first starting point is for the city of Chandler to really look at what would be a meaningful attainment goal for the city. And I know that Terry has done a lot of this work around Achieve 60, and maybe thinking about what would it take to take all of that support and commitment to attainment to the next level. Start to dig in on the data and think about what are the strategies that Chandler could implement to accelerate progress and ensure that all students are meeting, or given the opportunity to succeed in school and career. And to Kathy's point, provided with multiple pathways to a well-paying job. So I think one first step, and I think you're right, like one person it's going to be hard for one person to tackle these very big issues alone, but using your voice to advocate for the changes that are needed is critical. And then combining forces with other like-minded leaders who want to see a vibrant economy in Chandler and know that education is critical to that is another part of the equation. So I think those are key things that you could do. Keep advocating, start working on looking at the data for Chandler and advancing some clear strategies that the community can get behind collectively.
Wow.
Wonderful.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think I've been charged, right?
There you go. Councilmember, you know, every time you and I are in a room, we each have 3 more to do. So,
That's right.
Erin and Rich, thank you so much. This is so critically important for us. And we look forward to seeing what's next for your team, as well as how Chandler moves forward. I want to do a shout out and thank our sponsors again for making this event possible: Intel, ASU, Air Products and Chemicals, and Wells Fargo. There's also an evaluation survey that will be sent to each of you after this program. Please fill it out. Let us know what you think, and also what we want to hear, and having these tough discussions as we move forward in education for future roundtables. Our next roundtable will be held on August 5th, so mark your calendars. And I just want to thank everybody. Great information. We will share the PowerPoint that was presented today to all of you. And I know I can see, I know Jen has asked for some things, maybe to come and speak to her board. So let's help keep spreading this word. I really appreciate it. So thank you again for your time, and thank you for your passion in helping Chandler move forward.
Thank you all. Stay tuned.
Thank you.